Thank you, Albert. And Michaela's presentation was, I think, a really good lead-in, or my presentation or my talk is a good complement to what he shared. And my talk is about sharing cities, but I want to start with sharing a short history lesson as a kind of reality check. So 2014 is the 75th anniversary of the New York World's Fair. Imagine 1,000 acres of exhibits showcasing the latest science, technology, and consumer products. Over 44 million people from around the world came through the doors of the 1939 World's Fair. And it was maybe one of the largest spectacles in the 20th century. The goal of the World's Fair, there were several, but two main ones that I'll key in on. One is to try to pull or help pull the United States out of the Great Depression. And the second goal was to tell a new story about how to get the good life, that technology and free markets is the way of the future and the path of progress. Now, the fair did very little to bring the U.S. out of the Great Depression, but the story that came out of the fair was a smashing success, an incredible demonstration of the power of public relations, and became the foundation for the post-war American dream. And you could argue that it was the opening salvo of the corporate takeover of the United States. And 75 years later, trillions, maybe trillions, billions, maybe trillions of dollars spent on advertising and lobbying. That vision, that seed planted at the World's Fair in 1939 has become fully manifest. And I live in the United States, the most fully realized market society in human history, characterized by hyper-capitalism, hyper-consumerism. And this was an experiment that we ran. And the results of the experiment are pretty much all in now. The US, and I have a kind of list here. It's pretty long. I tried to shorten it, the failures, so bear with me. The US has the largest economy in the world, but in the top 20 economies, we have the highest income inequality, the highest homicide rate, the highest incarceration rate, the highest CO2 emissions, the highest water consumption, the highest spending on health care, and the lowest life expectancy, and the worst scores on the UN indices of child well-being and gender equality. And a paper just came out before Ouishare Fest. Very rigorous academic thing, and they didn't pull any punches, which is unusual for academics. They just pretty much said, after this really deep analysis, that Americans have no influence on public policy and that we live in an oligarchy. So you add all that up, and I think it's becoming increasingly clear to Americans that we're sliding, maybe irreversibly, to third world nation status. And the funny thing is that even though the results are in, the world seems to be racing to follow our example. And as we talk about the future and how cities are so important to it, and we live in an urban century, the story about cities is that innovation, technology, and startups are going to save us. So that sounds a little bit familiar. And I think we should recognize this story for what it is. It's old wine and new skin, and a new skin. And if we want different results, then we need a new story about cities. That experiment didn't work. We ran it. We tried it. It's time for something new. And we need to change the story about cities from seeing them as marketplaces to seeing them as commons. And this is a kind of idea of how you can think about the major activities in society or in a city, that you have these three sectors: government, market, and commons. And the government and market have become kind of one and are not serving our interests, not serving the public interest, serving the private interest, a very small number of people, and they're destroying our world. But we have a card up our sleeve, and that's the commons. It's another way that we can create value and create our lives together and do it in cities. And what is a commons? What is the commons? It's a place that we can share resources, co-produce, and do it in a democratic, peer-to-peer basis, and do it as a nonprofit. And we have a certain amount, or maybe an added degree of freedom there, because we're not doing things for money. And so the regulatory and legal regime is a little bit different. So there's some opportunities there. So this is the path that we have left as a species to pursue. Right? We can reform market and government, but that might take too long. We may not have enough time to do that, and it may not be possible to do that. So our argument at Shareable is that the commons is the fastest, best opportunity to get the kind of lives in society that we want. And the commons is also, back to a kind of definition, it's all that we inherit and create that belongs to everyone, and it includes things like nature, civic infrastructure, culture, knowledge, and a lot more. We take for granted all the things that we share. The market actually depends on the commons. There is no market without the commons. How could you do business if you didn't have language? Language is something that we create together, that we share, that no one owns, but that we all own together. And so what I'll do with the following slides, and I'll have to go through them because I've got 4 minutes here, is just illustrate what does the sharing city look like? What does a city as commons look like? And do it through some of my favorite examples. So Bogota is a good example of what I call commons-based urban development, where you focus on things like parks, schools, and public transportation, and where access is equal access is the priority, and that the priority isn't to grow the economy, but to grow people's happiness. And participatory budgeting. Anyone know what participatory budgeting is? Go ahead. Someone say what it is. Just allocating part of your taxes on a project you choose. Right, allocating part of your taxes to projects that you choose. So it's a kind of crowdfunding, but done as a partnership between citizens and government. There's 1,500 cities that are doing some form of participatory budgeting. It shouldn't be really something that is in every city, that we should be deciding how our tax dollars are spent. Public banking, which is instead of banking the taxpayers' money in a private bank and the money going to fund things that may not be good for the community, you do the opposite. It's a bank owned by the people, and the benefits of having that bank are focused back onto the community. This is Evergreen Cooperatives. So this is a really interesting model that's being tried out in Cleveland, where you hook up co-ops in lower-income communities with anchor institutions who buy from them, like universities, colleges, and the local government. Community energy. There are 700 energy co-ops in Germany, and this is a way to get renewable energy quickly. If the people own this and these are values-driven enterprises, then we can retire legacy energy infrastructure and get the kind of energy infrastructure we need. This is a wireless internet open source, citizen-driven service in Catalonia in Spain, something like 20,000 nodes, and it's free. And if you want service, you find the protocol, buy the hardware, put it on your roof, and you become part of the network. A co-op, something like in Japan. In Japan, this is a consumer co-op in Japan, and their slogan is "Stop shopping." But 1/6 of the population of Japan buys through a club or buying club or co-op, and then these are some of the cool grassroots projects. And this is what we're really focusing on now: is organizing the community that are doing tool libraries, co-working spaces, time banks, repair cafes, maker spaces, things that are mostly nonprofit, public benefit, that aren't scalable in the sort of VC Silicon Valley way, but have impact through replication. These are spreading organically, and what we want to do at Shareable through our Sharing Cities Network initiative is fan the flames of that approach to impact, which is through replication, not scale. And so to close, I want to share a video with you guys of the Sharing Cities Network, and it's a kind of an invitation to get involved. It's something that we're doing with our partners, including Ouishare, who we've working closely on this, and any kind of group can get involved, and let's play it, and that's my talk. Thank you.